am going to move on to introducing our first session. The speaker is Mark Austin. He's from a company called Mutatio. A little personal insight. He lives in Hailsham, which is now the center of the universe. It's near where I was born, in the south of England. And he's going to be talking about something that I'm sure we're all on the receiving end of, which is too much information. And you don't know whether it's true or not. We live in a world of fake news. So welcome, Mark. You're on. 15 minutes, please.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you to the Project Data community for letting me talk. My name is Mark Austin from AutoMutatio. Despite my youthful good looks, it's nearly 30 years in the construction industry in various roles. But the last 2 years, and certainly the last year, I've been focusing more on how we manage change on projects, because it's the only thing that we ever talk about in business, but it's the only thing that nobody's talking about. And with particular case study is the coronavirus infodemic, and how do we make sense of this data overload, and what lessons can we learn for projects? So if we look at the IPA, their recent piece of work on the key components of success, they talk about plan realistically, and that's one of our process steps. They talk about how do you identify and control the scope. We talk about how do we manage complexity and risk, how do we analyze it, and then how do we notify it to the right people at the right time. And ultimately, it's about being an intelligent customer and contractor for that matter. So what we try and do is we use those 4 steps as a standard process to help manage complexity on projects and change. I'm just going to go back to February this year. We're all familiar with the current situation we find ourselves in, but the WHO talked about infodemics, and this was before really in the UK, I guess we were really into the thing. And it's causing panic and fear in many places. And this really struck a chord with my many years in construction, and is really the information overload and overwhelm the problem. So what is an infodemic? Well, it's an excessive amount of information about a problem that's typically unreliable, spreads quickly, and makes a solution more difficult to achieve. And I'm sure any project professionals could probably chime with this at some point in their career on a particular aspect. So we've been tracking all of the government advice and all of industry's advice since the start of the pandemic in sort of March time. And we've really got the formal bit, the external change, the external guidance and advice. And everyone here has got the informal bit in their own businesses and organisations. And this could be the Teams chats, emails, Zoom calls. It could be emails, it could be formal documents, whatever. But together, we've got this total amount of information that we have to manage every day on projects. So if we just look specifically to the COVID-19 example, as I say, since March we've been tracking it, and we're now up to over 7,000 updates and pieces of advice. We're nearly at 5,000 documents, and there's over 5,000 revisions, and this is just purely from government guidance. And if we, on the right hand side with the pie chart, if we look at sort of the Holy Trinity, we've been using our technology, which is AutoMutatio. We've been using the standard process, but really all of the change comes from people, whether we write emails, whether we write tweets or specifications, etc. So actually, how can we get to the people and what the work we're doing to try and manage this information overload? So if we turn that sort of basic information, you know, every piece of information has a story, is a story. It's got a start, it's got a middle, and it's got an end. And we track all of those pieces for every piece of information and every update. And the question we ask ourselves is, where are we in that change story? And this is all of the information over time from the COVID response. In the early days, the changes and the updates are really like summaries, and the documents are the meat and the information we really need to take on board. And there was actually very few documents back in April and May. But as you can see on the right-hand side, this is as the beginning of November, there's more and more documents, there's more and more information, and it's more and more complex because, as we all know, we've got different restrictions in different parts of the countries and in all the devolved administrations. So if we come back to the people variable, there are 5 key questions that we ask ourselves, having worked on this information since March. The first one is, why is nobody talking about change? It's the only constant. If you Google constant change in Google, this is what you get. It's always there. The second question is, why is no one talking about coronavirus in construction? Since March, it's dropped off a cliff. And the third one is really, when you start to get into this information and you look at the government's reasonable worst case scenarios, there are so many parallels with construction, it's untrue. And perhaps are all our forecasts, are all our programs reasonable best case scenarios rather than reasonable worst case scenarios? But it's this overrider on all of this information. It says the starting estimates and infections, hospitalizations and deaths could lead to a larger peak. And actually there's a lot of parallels with information, and perhaps it's just the information peak we need to manage to get better projects. The fourth bit is, as soon as we hit the send button, we're proliferating the information overload. And is it our obsession with being notified about everything all the time, which is really fueling the challenge and the overwhelm? And the last bit is, where are our peaks? We know from all the information we've tracked that on average, on a Friday, we get 2 to 3 times more information from government than any other day of the week, just as we're all heading home for the weekend. It's now worse because actually we get it on a Saturday morning because they're not doing a summary until the following day. But is this why we can really struggle at the start and end of projects when we've got all this information? Does it all come out on a Friday? But if we look at the parallels and how we use our tool to help get the information, really the information comes from 5 sources. It's all from people and organisations, but the external is the case here. It's the stuff we've been looking at in the government's response and CLC, etc. Supply chain is obvious. Us is an organisation we represent, our clients, or if we're in complicated projects, it could be the client's client. And the way that we do it is we really focus on the words and the content of what's in the changes, what's in the documents. And the way we do that, that's effectively our behaviours, is we look at the tags, and by automatically tagging, it's equivalent to testing. It's getting a sample of what's going on in the project ecosystem. And you can think about the updates as really they're the cases, they're the things we need to be focusing on, but we've got so many, we don't know which one is the priority. And as we work up the pyramid, we've then got, patients, that's equivalent of documents, hospitalizations. These are really serious things that are going to start to hurt us. And sadly, we all know that if we get positive or negative outcomes at the top. So we're really focusing on the behaviours at the bottom and the tags to try and drive outcomes. So here's some of the things that we've learned over that last period. If we look at time and cost, and I know on this forum many times we talk about the factor of 10 of improvement, we've already seen a factor of 1 to factor 4 of admin savings. We can now do it 4 times faster than we were in March, because we automatically infeed, we automatically tag and track everything. We're working rapidly towards a factor of 10 improvement in managing change and identifying which one we need to focus on. If we look at a sample from the tool at the bottom there, just on testing, the key word is guidance on coronavirus testing, including who is eligible. There's 53 updates. That's changed 53 times. So how many times on our projects is that key piece of information changed? Do we actually know? And then the top one is actually the amount of tags over time. It was really simple to start with. We all had to stay at home. Very few tags, didn't change much. But when we got to August, it started to get complex. We had different geographies, we got different guidance, different sets of standards. And this for me is just like a mega project. As projects grow, your nomenclature changes, things change, language changes, scope may change. And actually, over time, it starts to get more and more complex. So if we can't manage it in a 21st century way, we're relying on all of us to do that consistently with huge amounts of information. So the thing I want to leave you all with is the bit that we're really working on is, so what is our R rate for projects? If we think about it, 1 email to 10 people is an R rate of 10 if we haven't got any constraints in it. But our typical week on a project is thousands of emails, hundreds of formal documents, scope specifications, orders, thousands of social media, including WhatsApp messages, tweets, texts, Teams chats, hundreds of external changes, could be local planning conditions, it could be local authorities, local residents, etc. But the variable is the X, the people. How many people have we got? Is that the constraint on our projects, the amount of people we've got or tools to be able to manage the information? And then the last one is really the X connections. So if we've got one change which has got 100 tags, is that far more proliferation and cause more trouble than anything else? And that's what we're getting. We're working on really hard. What is the R rate for construction and how do we manage it? So I'm going to leave you back where I started with an infodemic, excessive amount of information about a problem. It's typically unreliable, spreads rapidly, and makes the solution more difficult to achieve. And that's our mission at AutoMutatio, is to self-change. It's what it means in Latin. It's to help manage change in a more effective way. And that's our purpose, to equip the world to find value in all of that change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. You've got some time for a question from me, potentially. This R number that you mentioned in construction, what insights do you think that's going to provide to construction? What are you hoping that might point people towards?
If I go to my organisational change and back office transformation and setting up major projects, the start and end of projects is always challenging. And it's because we have a huge amount of information to produce to be able to get off the ground. Things are changing naturally. And is it because we just haven't got the tools or the people to manage that volume of overload? It's a hunch. We want to prove that's right. Is it you get a cheeky part of a job? Is it that if that thing on a Friday, is that true? So we should all have people on a Saturday just to understand what we've got to deal with, rather than assume a Monday to Friday. And when we get to the end of the job, we're currently working on a verification module, which is about handing over projects. Notoriously challenging, notoriously difficult, particularly in power and process type projects. And actually, how do we manage this information at the end when we all get excited by a new project? So we all know the theory or the reality. What we want to do now is, can we use the 21st century tools just by tracking what we're writing, what's coming in, to start to understand where our peaks in information are and how we can then manage it. And it may be eliminate it, stop doing something, so we can get it down, get it to manageable levels again, and then we can carry forward. Yeah. In my professional career, I've never regretted stopping anything, because sometimes you need to pause.
Sure. So are you saying that it will accelerate your ability to sort of sift and prioritize and actually validate what's real and what isn't in terms of information? Yeah.
In real time, we have 850 tags, and it sorts the database every day by what information comes in. And if a new piece of information comes in, a new tag, it will go right through the database in less than 10 minutes and retag the whole database. So
okay. Presumably, once you've identified the tags, you can configure it to any context as such. So it could be
work breakdown structure.
It could be a road project. It could be FMCG manufacturing or whatever, but any kind of environment, because you're picking up information clues really.
It doesn't matter. We're currently doing a proof of concept on work breakdown structure with over 15,000 lines of breakdown structure, as an example.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Really good stuff. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Steve.